Hi everybody, this is Tim Chavez from Faith Matters. In this episode, we got to speak with Carol Lynn Pearson about her new book, The Love Map, Saving Your Love Relationship and Incidentally Saving the World. Carol Lynn has been a powerful and well-known voice in the Latter-day Saint community for many years. She's the author of several remarkable works, including the memoir, Goodbye, I Love You, and the book of poetry, Finding Mother God. Her full catalog of works is too impressive to list here, but one other highlight is that she wrote one of our very favorite primary songs, I'll Walk With You, which was also published as a children's book in 2020. Carol Lynn will also be speaking with us at Restore, our upcoming gathering in Salt Lake City. Carol Lynn's new book, The Love Map, is a remarkable work of fiction that presents some deeply important truths. It's the story of a young woman whose fraught relationship with her husband is reaching a breaking point just as she suffers traumatic injuries in a terrorist attack. But a vision she experiences while recovering gives her something remarkable and unexpected, a map that will serve as a guide to healing her most intimate relationship and allow her to see each person in her life as God does. Though the book is intended for an audience much wider than just Latter-day Saints, its message resonated deeply with us, and Carol Lynn's hard-won wisdom and remarkable gifts as an artist were abundantly apparent throughout the book. We'd strongly encourage anyone hoping for healing in their relationships to pick it up. We really think you'll be glad you did. You can find the book available on Amazon now. We want to extend a sincere thanks to Carol Lynn for coming on, and we hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did.
All right. Well, Carol Lynn Pearson, it is always such a delight to have you on the podcast. We're so excited to talk to you. So thank you for coming back on.
Oh, Aubrey and Tim, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just thrilled to be here. I really am.
So I think maybe to start, it would be helpful if you gave us just a little bit of a taste of the story. Most people will not have read the book yet. So could you give us a little bit of a taste of where the story goes so that we can kind of have a context for all of these, for the conversation that we're going to have?
Well, then let me just read the first two paragraphs,
Perfect.
and then
Sounds great.
we can just go from there. And the title of this book is The Love Map, subtitle, Saving Your Love Relationship and Incidentally Saving the World. And we will talk more, I'm sure, about, how I got into all of this. But let's just jump in as if you're opening the book and here's chapter 1. You may think that what I'm about to tell you was just a very bright dream, or that it came from the anti-anxiety medication they gave me at the hospital after tending to my cuts from the bomb that went off in the cafe. And of course, I have considered that. But what you have to understand is that this event happened in a reality that is truer than the brushing your teeth reality. And I am profoundly certain that the stones of the western wall of the Temple Mount were real, and even more certain that she was real, and that what she told me is true. Last night was my first night home, and I planned to sleep late, but early I was awakened by words. The urgency is intense, and I feel like I am a runner commissioned to bring a message to the king, a vital message that tells us how to stop the war. And the war must stop because there is too much pain and too much loss. You will have to forgive me as I deliver the message, for I stumble as I run, and I stumble as I write. I was in Jerusalem because my boss at Google sent me there. And actually, I was relieved to be there because I didn't want to spend my third wedding anniversary with my husband, Daniel, due to the fact that I did not have much love left. So here we meet Joanna, who is a woman, a very charming woman, I happen personally to believe, who is married to her true love. And after 3 years, the wagon of love breaks under the burden of life. So, and that's what most of us find as romantic love has to move into something else. And what we're going to discover here is that there is an actual map to finding and experiencing what I call the kingdom of love, which is the heart. So that's my really quick introduction here. So take it where you
Perfect.
will.
Thank you. I wonder, before we move, I want to talk about what the love map actually is and go through these 7 kingdoms, but talk about where you got this idea maybe before we go there. What were you hoping to talk about that you haven't done yet with your other books?
Sure. Well, see, I love to read stuff. I love to learn things. I love to learn from other spiritual traditions that are not a separation from my own religious heritage, but adding new things to it, because all of us have perspectives that are really very useful. So maybe about 25 years ago, I did some reading about what are called the chakras. And I found it so fascinating. Now, I only use the word chakras a couple of times in this book because I think to some it might be off putting. Oh, I don't want another religion. I call these the kingdoms. And as there are 7 chakras identified, I just identify them as the kingdoms that we go through in our journey to enlightenment. You know, one of the phrases that I love in our own LDS tradition is eternal progression. And I think this love map fits in so well to the idea of moving from a lower consciousness, a lower vibration, up to an entirely godly vibration, godly consciousness. So I was so excited to do this reading, and at the same time to realize that this whole growth system applies to humanity in general, because civilization has gone through all these same phases, really, and also to our personal development. But what especially fascinated me was how these kingdoms can serve us in a love relationship. And I wrote about 3 different versions of this over the last 20 years. And I did not feel good about any of them. But then about 2 years ago, I got the idea of writing it in first person. So once I got the idea that my person in this story could speak in her own words, could speak in first person, I thought, oh, I can do that. I can feel it now. And as soon as I wrote that paragraph that I just read to you, and sensed her urgency, sensed what she wanted to speak to everybody about, I thought, oh, I know, I've got it now. I've got the voice. I can do that. And so in terms of asking what I would like to do with this, I want to contribute it as one more tool to help us move in the direction, certainly that Jesus and every other major teacher in our history has mapped out a similar kind of thing, moving us upward and upward into the heart, into love. And as I studied this, I thought, this is so brilliant because it's a step-by-step guide. And we don't have to feel that we're lost. And we can kind of look back at our history and where we are now and see, oh, I get it now. I get it. And here's what I have to do to move more securely into what I call into the fourth kingdom.
So in the book, Carol Lynn, Joanna is taken, and hopefully this isn't too much of a spoiler, but Joanna is taken sort of on a tour of the map itself through what you might call kingdoms. And I'm wondering if you could maybe give us a brief tour of the kingdoms so that we can turn the conversation and start to talk about the concepts more specifically.
Absolutely. As Joanna is in Jerusalem, and she is injured in an explosion of a bomb in a cafe. And she does, as a result of this and her own preparation, she does experience a vision. And she meets her higher self, the self that we all have, the better angel of our nature, as it were. But she meets this person embodied in this vision, who tells her, Joanna, you have told me that you want to be a map maker. The most important of all maps is already made, the map to the promised land. It is your calling to find it, to follow it, and to share it. It's here in the Holy Land, like hiding in some cave like the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's in a land even more holy than the one on which we stand, dear one. It is here. I raised a hand and placed it over her heart. And we go on from there. Her higher self is speaking to her. Shall we begin? I nodded. As you observe, falling in love is easy. It's rising in love that is the challenge and the growth and the joy. These points of light are sacred places where body and spirit connect. Each is of a higher vibration than the one below. I like to call them kingdoms. The kingdom of the first, the root of everything. Sylvia pointed at the lowest wheel, which lit up a dark blood red, is at the base of the spine and governs instinct, safety, survival. Think, I have. The second, this rich orange located in the reproductive organs, governs sexuality, emotion, creativity, self-esteem. I feel. The third, a yellow sun in the abdomen, governs power, action, individual will. I can. The fourth, this lush green in the heart, governs compassion, forgiveness, generosity. It is the midway point, the meeting place of earth and heaven. I love. The fifth, blue in the throat, governs communication and pronounces the future. I speak. The sixth, indigo, in the forehead or the third eye, governs spiritual vision. I see. The final wheel, becoming a gleaming violet shot with highlights of white. And the seventh, at the crown of the head, governs pure knowledge, revelation. I know.
Wow, thank you so much.
Joanna studies that map on the body, and it looks very challenging, and says, I don't know if I can do that. That looks very, very, very difficult. But she is assured that this is the reason that she is here. In fact, this is the reason that all of us are here on this earth, to develop our consciousness, our abilities, our capacity to love from this very basic, primitive form, concept, up to the heart, where Christ has called us, where every great master has called us. And so Joanna's higher self immerses them in this journey, where we first of all see how civilization has developed, and then how each of those same categories of development are shown in the relationship that she has had with her husband, and then to see essentially where she is stuck. And while we have to keep in mind all 7 of these kingdoms, the 2 that we focus on primarily are the third in the abdomen of power and control, which is a wonderful thing unless we use it badly. And then the higher one, the one of the heart, which is love.
Yeah.
So that's in a moment. That's just where we're going.
Thank you. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. I think maybe the first thing that really struck me after reading the book was how profound it felt to tie the body to connection to God. I mean, we have this theology of embodiment, right? Like we believe that our bodies are tools for connecting us to God. But I think often when it comes down to it, the way we talk about our bodies is that it's the obstacle to our connection. That our bodies are what's offering so much resistance through appetites and passions, and we don't have the will to stay connected to God. And I really loved how in the book the map is laid out over the body. It is the body. Like trusting the body seems like the first step to being able to use this map in a way that would be connecting to God. So can you talk about how you think we could do this better? How can we it felt like trusting the body was a really important piece to Joanna's development, and something that felt really new to me that I think maybe is more comfortable in more Eastern traditions. So how would you like to see us sort of incorporate this idea that our body really is a gift?
Well, just by looking at our language now, you suggested that we have in our religious training this idea that the body is there, or the natural man is an enemy to God.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Although that phrase is actually followed by unless he or she follows the path of the spirit
Mhm.
and rises up above. And so that is very much in harmony with what we're talking about here. And you know, way back in medieval times, there was this terrible concept that the body was, Satan's domain, and we had to just
Mhm.
flagellate the body. And we're way beyond that now. And yet, where there is, in our religious tradition, and of course in many, that the idea that the spirit has to tame the body. And of course, we do have to work with the body to choose the higher good.
Mhm.
But if we demean the body and not realize that the body is our friend, the body is where we live, and we can use it well and wisely, and it can be our education as we develop higher consciousness, so that body and spirit can blend in a beautiful way, because that they ought not to be
Yeah.
enemies.
Yeah.
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 Let me ask you if it's okay about a little bit about the second kingdom. When Joanna in the book is being sort of taken through the kingdoms, she encounters in the second kingdom this culture of creativity that's also expressed through sexuality. And what's interesting about it to me is that her encounter with that sexuality in that kingdom is completely free of shame, and instead it evokes a real sense of joy and wholeness. So, but it seems to me that it's very often that religious people, that's not how they experience sex and sexuality. It is more associated often with feelings of, uh, guilt and shame and secrecy and those types of things. So I'm just curious how how you see that, and how you would like to see sexuality talked about, especially within a religious culture like ours.
Sure. Well, yes. The second chakra, which is sexuality, reproduction, creativity, that can be a troublesome one, because we've placed such a lot of baggage around it. But the way that I describe it in this chapter of the second kingdom, and I name this chapter Joyous Sexuality, because it should be. And the place in civilization where we have this moment to see how it is all developed, on the shore of Crete in the early Bronze Age, And the Minoan civilization was enormously creative, and also had a feeling of joyful sexuality that infused all of their creativity. And Joanne is instructed in this Minoan civilization of the goddess. Lovemaking is honored as an art, a tribute paid to the divine. I am in a trance, I whispered. A trance, as are they, Sylvia replied. Life is now transcendent. Time stops for a taste of eternity. And when the energy of this second kingdom joins with that of the fourth kingdom, when passion unites with compassion, as is happening to them at this moment, ah, heaven indeed. And that's kind of the beautiful feeling that I wanted to convey in examining this kingdom as truly a place where, in a marriage, the two people should be able to express and receive tremendous physical, emotional, spiritual joy. Mm. And to a lot of people, that's kind of a brand new idea. And I'm sure you have talked to people in our own LDS community where this is just a stumbling block, because we don't really talk about it very much in terms of the joyful expression that should be there.
Yeah.
And I've talked to women who, got into a marriage just knowing the basic facts of what's going to be going on here, but not ever being invited into the idea that it's a beautiful thing that should be celebrated. Mm-hmm. So in terms of our own religious tradition, I think there's a long way to go there. Yeah. I personally, I would like for us to change a little bit of our conversation around this. I would wish that we could somehow express that this invitation to sexuality is such a beautiful, desirable, joyful opportunity that it has to be protected. That's why we have our structures around it, because it is so precious that we can't just demean it. Really, having full access to the body of another human being, I think, is an astonishing privilege. And casual sex is such a demeaning concept to me. So to keep the idea of sex in a way where we do have it as really important, but to have the concept be that we protect it because it is so valuable. Mm-hmm. And once you are in a committed, loving relationship, this is something that should be joyfully expressed so that there's tremendous satisfaction to both parties.
Something, and I'd love to ask you a little bit more about this, because something else that I felt like I really got from that chapter is this idea that it's a life energy, that it's not a kingdom that is only able to be expressed through the act of like sexual intercourse. Like it is a life energy that is bleeding into everything that you're doing. And when you talk about Crete, it's like this beautiful, joyful society, and they're just exploding with creativity. And so I think that was useful for me to realize that it's not such a small box either. For someone who isn't in that kind of a relationship, how else can this life energy express itself?
Well, as we continue the journey and go from the second kingdom of sexuality up through the abdomen and then into the heart, everybody, in a marriage or not, makes that journey. Mm. And as you suggest, there is something unique about sexuality. But yes, the vibrancy of the energy can be expressed otherwise. It can be expressed as we move up into in our journey up to the heart.
Yeah, thank you. I love that.
Okay. Should we talk about the third kingdom specifically? This is an interesting
Yeah.
one. In the story, Joanna encounters um maybe the most challenging aspects of her journey in the third kingdom. Could you talk about some of its beauties and its dangers?
Certainly. And as we go through the story, we we see in Joanna's interactions with her husband, as they get to this point where they everything is falling apart, really. We see that probably both of them, once we get the vision of where we're going here, that they are, well, it's Joanna we're focusing on here. She is stuck in the third. Now, the third is not to be avoided. The third is an essential part of the journey, and it's a wonderful place. My chapter about this third kingdom, I call the blast furnace, and each of these has their own element, and the element here is iron. And so it's in the Iron Age that we see the march of history developing all of this. And so in the chapter, I say through the voice of Joanna's higher self, as it began in the march of history, the third kingdom was known as the Iron Age. Think perhaps 1500 BC. And it took us through the Industrial Revolution and into today's technological and information age. On the map of your body, it is the third energy center, your abdomen, seat of your power, home of your will. Its color is yellow, like the sun. The element of the third kingdom is fire. And she goes on to show Joanna through this panorama of history that they're looking at. All of the acts and all of the things that have produced the world that you know came from the energy that moves both mind and matter. And in the third kingdom, energy exploded. The fire shapes matter into the printing press, the scalpel, the airplane, the computer. And it also shapes matter into weapons of torture and of mass destruction. This fire shapes mind into the plays of Shakespeare and the Constitution of the United States of America. And it also shapes mind into the burning of witches and into hate and arrogance of those with a judgment of those with different skin or speech or religion or ideology. There is power here in the third, Joanna. Beautiful, dangerous, essential power. Fire that can warm and fire that can burn. Here we build as never before, and here we destroy as never before. Which of these two choices will triumph in the large story of mankind and the little story of Joanna and Daniel? So, as we bring into our love relationships the energy of the third kingdom of fire, it's essential, because one can't even have a committed love relationship without guts. I mean, the abdomen gives us guts to do something.
Yeah.
And in order, when we make a commitment in marriage, that requires us moving onto a territory that is really, really challenging. And it requires all of the energy of the third to make that happen. And then it also gives us that energy in excess, so that when the power that comes in this kingdom is my power over your power, my will over your will, then that's where all the trouble comes. And
Yeah.
that's where Joanna and her husband Daniel have been experiencing their life now in the third.
Yeah.
So that's
That's great. That's a great place to pause for a second. So I really related to a lot of what Joanna learns about in the third. And the thing that I really appreciated was this idea that it is a good thing. It really is a good thing. It's energy that we need, and it's not the final destination. How do you see this kingdom, this third kingdom, showing up in our church communities, and where would you like to see them moving?
Mm, yeah. The word power is sort of the major word for this third kingdom. And I have learned a lot from a wonderful teacher, Rianne Eisler, who's written a great deal about partnership. And her ongoing theme is that we must come to a place where it is not power over, but power with.
Hmm.
So that in a marriage relationship or a love relationship, neither one should have the power to say what's what and what you must do and all of that. And because partnership will, if done correctly, will utilize your strengths and my strengths, and there won't be a power struggle. Now, we happen to live in an era called the patriarchy. And we happen to live in a very patriarchal church. And so we have this real challenge to utilize the power of men and the power of women, which can contribute different things. But in general, we give a lot more emphasis to the power of men. Mm-hmm. In our homes, in our private homes, men and women kind of have to work all this out in their own independent ways, hopefully in a way that nobody has power over the other, but they work together with the power. So in our very patriarchal institution, there is a lot of power over, not necessarily power with. And we don't know how all of that is going to work out. We don't. But I think we do know the general trajectory that all of that has to take, which is less and less power over others as power with others. Yeah. So I'm just interested in watching that dynamic and realizing that all of us, all of our institutions, as well as our church institution and our political institutions. See, what we are seeing now, my gosh, in the world, in our country, is this runaway power of my will over your will. We see these terrible divisions rather than coming to the place that we must finally come to, where your good is my good and my good is your good. We'll talk about that more when we get up into this destination place, which is the heart. In order to get truly into the heart, we have to examine what we're doing down here in the third kingdom. This place where power is so essential, but power can run amok so easily.
Yeah.
And we're just feeling our way through. Once we are residents of the fourth kingdom of the heart, the place where Jesus has called us to live, once we are absolute citizens of that kingdom, this up here will kind of take care of itself, because we will then speak from love. We will then see through the eyes of love, and we will be unified with Godness, which is only pure love. Yeah. So this map, I think, is a brilliant thing to examine what we're doing right now in the third kingdom, in our church, in our marriages, in our own personal personalities as we interact with the world in general. Seeing, oh, it can happen. Look how close they are. There's just a few inches from the abdomen up into the heart. And sometimes there's just a few inches in a love relationship, just a few inches between resentment and forgiveness.
Yeah.
And moving into love. So that's why I'm so thrilled to offer this map, because it is such a useful thing, recognizing where we are, recognizing that, all we have to do to climb up into the fourth, which is our goal now, is just to follow what Jesus said. We don't want to be stuck in the third. It's a great place to utilize the strong energy that is there for us.
Yeah.
But to be stuck there is a terrible, terrible thing. And my woman in this, my young woman here, realizes that's where I am. I'm stuck. I'm stuck in the third. And I see now, help me move up into the fourth.
Yeah.
So that's that.
I really loved, actually, one of the most memorable parts of the book for me was in the third, where Joanna is sort of shown in this vision, a glimpse of her pioneer ancestor, a woman who used that power that she had inside of her, and her, and her individual will and ability to do hard things, to not only take her family across the plains, but also to serve as a midwife and push through all sorts of obstacles of pain and fatigue and suffering in order to help other people. And it really was a great example of the third kingdom sort of being infused with that fourth kingdom love. And I as we sort of move into the fourth kingdom, that's what I wanted to ask about. I think all of us have experienced glimpses of it, where once we sort of understand the map, we can say, oh, like we can look back on times in our lives when we have felt like we were at least visiting the fourth kingdom, that we understand what that truly godlike or Christ-like love looks like, but it's so difficult to actually take up residence there.
Right. Well, now, Tim, I just want to disagree a little bit with the idea that we have had glimpses of being in the fourth. I think so many of us throughout the world we live a great deal of the time in the fourth. Let us not minimize all of that.
I should probably just speak for myself.
Oh yeah, right. Of course, you're one who is just way down here. But if we can recognize that we do this dance between the fourth kingdom and the third kingdom, between love and power, then we can just more quickly say, oh, okay. And once I gave a sacrament meeting talk, and a little different language about what we're talking about here, but that the law of Moses was kind of a third kingdom law, and that here comes Jesus with this fourth kingdom law, saying this is a higher law, which indeed it is. So I said, so all of us will slip out of the fourth. We'll slip out of our heart, and we'll slip back down into the law of Moses. And in our marriages, often we do live the law of Moses. Oh, you did this, well then I'll do that. You're an eye for an eye, and then all of us slip back and forth there. So I suggested that that when we slip out of the fourth kingdom, out of the heart, out of love, we just say to ourselves, or maybe to somebody else, oh, I'm sorry, I just had a law of Moses moment. I'm going to try to get back up into the higher place, into Jesus's command to love. I'm going to do that.
It's so useful to just have the map. Just having that image in your mind, I think, is really helpful for that exact situation. You have words for what is happening. I've even had just memories come to mind since the book where I've had that exact feeling of just slipping into the fourth or slipping out of the fourth And then
I slip into the fourth. Aubrey slips out of the fourth.
Of course.
I the one that came most immediately to mind was this just a couple of years ago. I got into this fender bender in a parking lot, and it was not a big deal. Nobody was hurt and the cars were minimally damaged, but I was absolutely having this law of Moses moment. I felt like it really did send me into this sort of like fight or flight first kingdom survival feeling, and I felt like a lot of just anger, and it's just been useful to say, okay, I would like to try that again in the fourth, and like and just have this vision for staying in this kingdom of love and handling a problem that arises. And multiple times since the book, we've had little things come up with our kids where I can feel myself just kind of tightening up into the third really, really easily and wanting to just lower the hammer and demand some jobs get done. and I've really loved just practicing being able to get things done, but from this fourth kingdom perspective.
Right. And I want to emphasize right now that it's not that we graduate from here, leave it behind, we move up here, and then we graduate from this one, leave it behind. We take with us the energy of every one of these kingdoms that we have been developing. We have to keep that with us.
Yeah.
And the creativity, the sexuality of the second, we don't want to leave that behind. We gather along the way, we gather every good thing from each of these places. And then if our primary residence is the heart, is the fourth, then we can more consciously and effectively utilize these other energies that we've brought with us.
I love that. Our friend Brian McLaren uses the metaphor of tree rings in his sort of stages framework, because with each successive ring in the trunk of the tree, it takes you to a new place, but it also includes all of the previous rings there, and their strengths are still included as part of the whole.
Right.
There's a part of this story where Joanna learns about the ego, and the ego is personified as the one with the sword. She kind of learns that the ego itself is not the enemy, that's actually something that's useful, and it only becomes a problem at a certain point.
Well, I think psychologists would tell us that we do have an ego for a good reason. It makes me, and it makes you, so that we can talk as different humans. But as I say here, when in that way the ego is our friend, but when the ego picks up a sword, it is not our friend. And so we see these runaway egos, and we see them in the newspaper, on the TV news all the time. Runaway egos of me and mine and my way of seeing things, and don't even talk to me about your way of seeing things. Mm-hmm. That is the ego so run amok. And yes, Joanna has to understand that this one with the sword that has been trying to keep her from finding and living in the fourth kingdom, because the ego then will have to be tamed. And there's this interesting process where Joanna comes to embrace the ego, still with the instruction here: you are welcome here, but I am in charge.
Yeah, I love that part. And I actually love at the end of every kingdom, she has this moment with herself where they melt into each other, where she embraces her first kingdom self or her second kingdom self. And every chapter has this really beautiful moment of melding together and sort of transcending and including, like we just talked about. And then even with the ego, that was maybe my favorite moment of the book. Could you do one more reading for us? I have it marked page 110. I thought this was a good fourth kingdom reading.
So Joanna tells us, the history of mortals in the fourth kingdom was shown to me. Humanity visited there almost from the beginning. I saw the first moment when a primitive hunter gave a drink of water to a stranger. I watched as Jesus said to the multitude, return good for evil, love your enemy. I watched that golden rule find expression through every great religious leader and through every enlightened leader outside of religion. Treat others the way you would like to be treated. So simple. I watched the archetypal work of the heart and the companion lungs flowing through the centuries like a cleansing breath, taking in fear and hate, giving out love. And the images are now forever carved on my heart. That same man who had said, "Love your enemies," now on a cross and wearing a crown of thorns, speaks, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And now she sees a glimpse of all of these tiny, little, beautiful things. A rock crashes through the window that shows a menorah ready for Hanukkah. And soon a Catholic neighbor displays a lighted menorah in her window, followed by the Muslim family across the street, the Baptists down the block, and the Mormons on the other side of town. That's the only place I ever refer to our community.
Yeah.
The moments went on in front of me, a documentary of love that seemed to have no end. The ordained work of the fourth kingdom, heartfelt, heart formed, heart delivered. I want to be part of that, I cried out to Sylvia. But you are. Of course you are. Everything you have done that comes from the heart is love and is lasting and has helped to build the fourth kingdom. You are part of it, she replied. Of course you are. And Daniel is too. Everything you have done that comes from the heart is love and is lasting and has helped to build the fourth kingdom. Your relationship has been built on many such moments. Would you like to see one of the best? I nodded. What, I wondered, what remarkable act was I about to witness? Slowly a room appeared. A couch, two people sitting on it, Daniel and Joanna. He was reading, out loud it seemed. She was rubbing lotion on the bare feet that rested in her lap. That's it? That's one of our great moments? That's nothing. Nothing? Two people are giving huge gifts. Daniel is reading to you poems by Emily Dickinson, though he would never choose the book for himself. Yes, that was very sweet. And you are giving Daniel a foot rub. He loves foot rubs, even though you hate feet. Oh, I do. I have a foot fetish in reverse. I can't stand feet. And yet, there you are. And there he is, happily doing for the other precisely what the other would love. Sweet, you say? Powerful, Joanna. Extraordinary. I stepped closer to the holographic image before me. Love spilling out of the hearts, through the voice, through the hands. And then something even more amazing, that odd experience I had when I first looked at Sylvia, all that light that was shining not on her, but in her. That's what I was seeing now, only multiplied as I looked at my husband. He was more beautiful than I had ever seen him, more beautiful than I had ever seen anyone. The brightness within shot out from every cell. His eyes, those little blue worlds that had amazed me, I saw now that each was a hologram of the universe, deep and unending and holy. This is the gift of the fourth, Joanna. When you see someone through the eyes of love, you are seeing them through the eyes of God. This is how God sees Daniel, every moment of every day for all eternity. Even when he does a very bad job of cleaning the stove. I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat. Sylvia gestured now to the other figure in the scene. And this, dear friend, is how God sees you. Oh, the thought of falling in love with myself had never crossed my mind. But it was happening. this woman who was me, became equally luminous, equally beautiful, breathtakingly beautiful. This is how God sees me? Sylvia nodded. Always. I wanted to keep this vision forever. And now a shaking happens, and she is thrust out of her vision of the fourth because she still has work to do in the third. Work to do in her experience of the third is this museum of pain that she has constructed over her marriage. All of the resentments, all of the things that Daniel failed to do, all of the things he did do that were not to her liking, she has placed them all on these pedestals and given them soft, indirect lighting. And she loves to spend time in her museum of pain to feel again how and when and why Daniel did this thing, did that thing, did this thing. And having seen a glimpse of the fourth, Joanna says, I can't bear it. I can't bear not to be there. And she learns that what she has to do, she has to destroy this museum of pain that she has built up, all of her resentments. And she gets on the horse that her ego had been on, and she has the sword now in her hand, but to do these very positive things. And she now just destroys all of the things that she had on these pedestals that she worshiped, all the pain and the resentments. And when they're gone, then she is qualified to begin again her journey to see more clearly how she can move into the fourth.
Wow. Thank you. Wow, that reading and that part, I mean, that feels like the real climax of the book. I wanted to ask you what that looks like in real life. I mean, I love like the drama of the moment with the crashing sword and these physical objects being destroyed. But I wonder, like, what does that really look like? Because I think for a lot of people, and I relate to this, that you want to have that moment, but it's hard to know how to really let go of resentment that has established some sort of place in your museum of pain.
I know. And we have great books that we can read these days. Like I am rereading Eckhart Tolle,
Mm.
The Power of Now.
Yeah.
And he's great at all. When
Yeah.
we focus in the now and not on what happened all these years ago, there are some people who chew and chew and chew on some awful thing that was done to them 10 years ago. But, we have the tools now. Well, we've always had the tools of Jesus calling us to live in the heart. Jesus calling us to give out only love. Jesus calling us to love your enemy, love the stranger at your gate, love your spouse when your spouse does stupid things. So
Yeah.
we have all of these mental, emotional tools. If we can just stop ourselves in the moment when we're on fire, if we can pause just a moment and say, what would Jesus ask me to do right now? And boy, you see, I've been rehearsing. I've been trying to do this, and believe me, I am not fully successful, but I am generally successful in having this part of me over here watching me get resentful, watching me speaking sharply to someone. So I guess we have to assume that it's possible, even here and now, that our primary focus will be this love energy. We are seeing in civilization now many evidences of human beings and organizations as they get together to say, what can we do to create more love on this planet? That is happening all over the globe. And we are all a part of that. We spend a great deal of time in the fourth. And our job is to stabilize ourselves there, do those things that invite others there, and just remember that this is the place where I belong. And that really the question that needs to be asked as we encounter everything, what would love do now? That's it. That's all.
I think that's such a great place to end. That's the lesson that Joanna learns, right? What would love do now? It's the most simple question for any situation. What would love do now? And I think it's helpful because in those moments when you recognize that you fell out of the fourth, it's the question to help you rise again. And it's the question that keeps you in the fourth.
Right.
And so simple.
Yeah.
And to forgive ourselves and to forgive everybody. You know, we have these words that we use. And when we can see a map that clarifies, oh, all I have to do now to get myself back into the fourth is to forgive. I can do that. I don't need to keep this resentment chiming in my brain. I can get rid of that. I can forgive that person for doing that.
Yeah.
And I want to take just a second to recommend so strongly to our listeners to pick up this book and actually read it. It's one thing to listen to it on a podcast, but to be actually taken so vividly through the map in the form of this story is really remarkable. And it's such an approachable book. It's not long, and it's so beautifully written. Carol Lynn, you continue to be a gift in our community. It's so aptly subtitled, Saving Your Love Relationship and Incidentally Saving the World. This is the rare book that actually has the opportunity to do
I
that.
want to add just one more thing. That subtitle is true. You know, there is this phenomenon called the tipping point, where if enough people do a certain thing, it just takes off.
Yes.
And so every one of us has the opportunity to say, what if I am the tipping point? What if my success in my love relationship is the drop of water that overflows the fountain, or the tipping point that just moves all of this into a whole new universe? We have to believe that we could be the one and behave in that way.
That's a powerful idea. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much. We really are excited for everybody to have this book.
Thank you. It's been
so
great to be with you.
Thank you.
Okay, a special thanks to Carol Lynn Pearson for coming on the podcast. Again, her new book is called The Love Map. You can find it available now on Amazon. And as always, for everybody that's left a review of our podcast or content on any platform, a special thanks to you as well. Your kind words really keep us going. And as always, you can check out more on faithmatters.org.